there's so much margin out there. We can save the hospitals money and pay our doctors better in the process and be more reliable.
Welcome to the Doctor's Eyes Only podcast, brought to you by Vestia Personal Wealth Advisors, where we are on a mission to help the highest caliber physicians achieve wealth that matters. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Doctor's Eyes Only podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Oschman, and today I'm very excited to be here with Ian Thompson. He is a urologist and the founder of Urology Locums. If you've ever wondered how locums actually works for doctors, who might be interested in it, how contracts can be structured, what rates look like, whether you need an agency, things like that, this episode is going to be a great one. We're going to talk about everything locums, talk about the basics, hopefully get some insider tips that maybe physicians should know before they think about jumping in. So welcome, Ian. Let's dive in.
Great. Glad to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, I know we've been trying to make this happen for a while because it's actually a topic we have not talked about yet on the podcast. So I'm very glad we were able to make it happen.
Yeah, it's great.
Perfect. Well, maybe you can share a little bit of your background for listeners who don't know you and what led you to start a locums company.
Yeah. Thanks. So I'm a urologist in San Antonio, Texas. I did the academics sort of route for a little while after doing a fellowship in urologic oncology, did business school while I was in an executive program while I was doing the academic faculty job. Ended up leaving academics to take a hospital administrative job as a CMO. But in part of that, I had to leave and ended up starting my own solo private practice, built a practice from scratch, learned how to do everything myself, from surgery scheduling, pre-auth, all that jazz. And did that about 10 years ago. And did the hospital admin stuff for about 6 years and left that about 3 years ago to, continue to focus on growing this company. But the reason sort of where the idea for the locums company came out of, when I was in academics, those executive MBA programs aren't necessarily cheap. You don't make a lot of extra money in academics. So, I did locums on the side to make money to pay for my business school tuition. And I was on assignment, down in Laredo, Texas, with working under one of the big locums companies. And they changed the nature of, I'd been told one thing, I was expecting to get paid X, took a week off from my normal job to go do that work. And then, when I get down there, the nature, of the work changed drastically I was getting my pay cut by like 2/3, of what I was expected to do. And I, as you know me, I kind of said, this isn't right. I was on the phone calling the big $1 billion locums company saying, hey, this isn't right. And there's been some recruiter was telling me all this stuff. I like, just when things don't add up, just always be curious. I tell my kids that, always be curious. If you can't explain it, you'll find, and that's where you find opportunities. And I think curiosity is where if you're entrepreneurial bent, just be curious. Made an appointment with the CEO of the hospital. He didn't know me from anybody, but I was the guy that was there. And I was like, I took off work and I was supposed to be getting paid this much. He said, you're supposed to get paid what? He goes, because we're paying this much. And I said, you're paying what? And so it got me into figure out how these contracts are structured, what significant margin was out there. And, kind of the phrase of your margin is my opportunity kind of, that came later, but that is, when you see huge margins in some industry or business, there's an opportunity there. And that wasn't really what I set out to do. My thought was, I said, if hospitals, and I was already working in the admin side, that's just a little bit before admin side of things that I'd been doing. But if hospitals are paying this premium for this work, and the doctors are doing the vast majority of the work, they should be getting the majority of that pay. And I'm fine with, there is value to what the locums company is doing. There's I learned how much, the hard way, how much work it goes into it. There's a great deal of naivety that went into the startup.
I think that's every good startup story.
It is every good startup, because even Jensen Huang, I've heard, will say, if I knew then what I know now, I never would have started it,
right.
NVIDIA or anything like that.
Yep.
But you just get to a point where you're like, I'm in too deep. There's no turning back. I got to keep going. This can lead into some of the contracting sort of conversation of how contracts are designed. most companies will use a base rate to include some hours or no hours of worked. And then there's an hourly callback in a lot of times. And so the way that the contract was, you had not a bad rate, but at the time, these are historic rates. And I was going to get paid like, $1,000 a day for just to be there for 24 hours working. Like I was going to get paid $150 for every hour that I came in and was working. But we're talking to the hospital CEO, it was like they're paying $3,000 or $4,000. I don't remember what the base rate, but I do remember that they were paying $450 an hour for every hour that I was working. Right. And so what I was arguing with the locums company, I said, why is there that differential? Like, I'm okay with you, you have some built-in margin and all that kind of stuff. But just that sort of margin out there was, I thought, and then I got sidelined. I lost revenue potential from both sides. So, but it also gave me opportunity to spend some time. So they pretty much just kind of sat me in course, said, you can't work. And the reason for that is because I had come into cover for somebody that had already come back. But there's things with contracts that they have a window they can't cancel too soon, and they're still on the hook for the cost of bringing the doctor in. So it was so I used the opportunity while I was there. I didn't have anything to do, but if I was going to still get that $1,000 a day, I had to sit in Laredo to get even that little bit. And so I heard there's another hospital across town was looking for a urologist for 5 years. And so I took the time to meet with their CEO, and long story short, ended up proposing to start a service line where I knew that we got a ton of urology up in San Antonio, which is 2.5 hours away from Laredo. So I said, I can come down here and negotiate a direct contract with you. You do all the billing, you staff the clinic, all that stuff, and I will just serve, I'll 2 days every other week. I'll see clinic, do smaller cases, and bring the big cases back to San Antonio. So, and then I ended up being the only urologist down there for Laredo for the next 6 years or so. Not at that one hospital. And I would drive down there. It got really busy. It was 3 days every other week. Next appointment book out at one point got to like 11 months out. When I heard that, I said, we can't do that as a surgical specialty. And I said, and that's when we flipped it to, I'd started the locums company at that point. We started staffing them 365, 24/7, and really elevating the access to urologic care for that area.
So just backing up, I know I hear doctors throw around the term like, oh, maybe I could do locums, or, maybe I could look into that.
Yeah.
Just very basic, what is locums? If I'm a doctor and I'm thinking like, oh, maybe, I need some flexibility, or I'm in between things or whatever, like what is it and how would it typically work? You mentioned kind of the daily rate plus hourly, like, is that typical? Just walk us through that.
Right. So, locum tenens is Latin for a placeholder. And I can go a long history of kind of how it came about, but it was, they started out of a group out of Utah, and it really has research trying to solve access issues. And then some companies came out of that, which are the historic sort of Compal and CHG, some of these larger companies that have come out of that history. But it can have all sorts. And so, and it depends on the specialty and how it looks. And so what we tend to do, so there's stuff where you can just go in and cover for a weekend. There's stuff where you can cover for a week. Or maybe you'll go for a 3-month stretch and you're there working all, kind of full time for several months at a time. It really depends on the specialty and sort of how it is. What we see and where we sort of specialize in, we cover and help manage entire service lines, urology programs. We also, where there is not a urologist full time there, and they've been recruiting for years, or they're actively recruiting. So we're helping keep and growing service lines while as a basis into which they're going to be able to recruit at some point. We provide like bench strength to existing programs where the demographics of urology workforce is such that a third of urologists are over 65 years of age and half are over 55. And, the younger ones don't go to a lot of the smaller communities and even mid-sized communities. But there are locums needs for urology in large metro areas. We're staffing in Atlanta, Houston, Dallas. All these places that are using locums. So it's not like it's immune. Any place is immune to the need. And so what I call full-time locums with us is, the way we have a lot of docs that like we are their primary source of clinical income. Now, it may all come from us. It may become a chunk from us and through another company
it's
or
a temporary
companies
job
as well.
maybe for the hospital, but it's not a temporary job for the doctor because they're just going to go on to the next one.
Right. And so a lot of times they may be bounced between a couple hospitals, or it may be in one place. We've had people that are plugged into one hospital for years.
Wow.
And may go on a week.
Why wouldn't the hospital just hire them at that point? Why would they keep the locums arrangement?
Oh, they try to. They try to. Yeah, well, they try to. Or they will at some point, but then it becomes then the doc going back, some autonomy issues and stuff like that. The doctors sometimes are looking to have better control. The hospitals that win are the ones that understand how to design contracts and clinical arrangements where the doctor has autonomy instead of, hey, I need you to show up here to here, these days from this time, that kind of stuff. Just giving, and that's why I advise clients, because we also help in recruiting from a perm standpoint, is just how do you give autonomy? How do you give big flexibility? And that's another important thing. I think you and I have talked about this before, is that as even the workforce is changing, 11.5% of urologists currently are female, and 45% entering training right now last year are female. So it's a shifting, and so the business models of a lot of practices, not just in urology but other surgical specialties,
are shifting.
Need to be shifting to be able to keep up with the work-life balance or desires that people have. But it's not even different. Even younger generation men, we're seeing that as well.
Right. I know that's been a huge shift just generationally in medicine, where I know a lot of doctors who are coming out now are looking for a little bit more integration with their kind of work and life and all of that versus, I know your father's a doctor, my father's a doctor. And for them, work was 95%, 95%, and home was, what could fit into the margins. And that's how medicine was. They weren't the only ones.
Exactly. And so this gives the people to say, like, when I'm off, I'm off. They're not trying to drag me back into the hospital and somebody or nobody's getting me about Epic and baskets or something like that. It's all the things, right?
We built our firm around one goal: helping physicians achieve wealth that matters. Time with your family, freedom in your schedule, and confidence in your decisions. Not sure how you're doing today? Head to vestiaadvisors.com/DEO, that's DEO for Doctor's Eyes Only, to take our 3-minute Physician Wealth Checkup and get a snapshot of where you stand today and what to do next.
So if you are full-time locums, how does the income compare to maybe being full-time on staff at a hospital? And I know it depends because hospital is very generic and, there's supply and demand considerations and all of that. But just generally, what's the opportunity like?
I'd say if you work 7 to 10, sometimes maybe 14, but 7 to 10 days, you can replace a full-time income.
Wow.
A week, depending on where they're coming from. I don't want to speak specifically within urology.
Yeah. But I've seen that in other specialties too. I have non-urologists that are working full-time locums and they work half the year.
Yeah. 1 to 2 weeks
make what they were making full-time.
And then, right. And then they're traveling. They're all, so, and the other thing you see people that are like, how do I retire earlier? Or this whole idea of retirement, I think needs to change or should be changed. I don't know if it needs, so why do you wait until the end of life to enjoy life when you've got the money, but you can't walk up the stairs or you can't go on the the great vacation that you want to. So, that's part of the.
Yeah, because you get some flexibility in your time. You also, I know I've had doctors that have gone to locations that are actually pretty cool to do locums contracts. And so they get to experience life in a different place. And for some people, that gives them a lot of fulfillment, not being in one place, going to the same job every single day.
And then going into places that are underserved. And you see this in medicine has changed. The appreciation levels, like you go to places where you're still considered, like you're treated like a doctor. I got so much fulfillment of, getting up at 4:00 in the morning to drive to Laredo to start your ORs by 7:30 in the morning for 6 years. But you're like, man, how long am I going to do this? But you get there and the people are so appreciative. So there's places like that. It's places like we're staffing in Appalachia, places that are, those areas exist across the country. And you're not taken for granted or you're not treated like, and so that's what we as professionals, you go to all the schooling and stuff. And a thank you is worth a lot more, I think, than the money, in my opinion. And I think you'll hear that from a lot of the doctors that work with us or work in a lot of these areas. They feel, and it's a way for them giving back and serving, which is why all of us went into medicine. It wasn't for business,
Yeah, I like hearing that a lot. I think there's a lot of a lot that's heavy when I'm talking with doctors at the rate that I talk with doctors anyway right now.
Yeah.
And so hearing that actually provides a little bit of levity where there are people out there that still really appreciate what doctors do and what doctors can do and going out of your way to provide that access to care. That's really cool to hear. So what stage of career, what type of doctor are you seeing coming to you looking for these types of opportunities?
Yeah, I think it's evolved a lot over, and I don't know how much, I think COVID had something to do with this, but I think it's changed a lot
since the pandemic and how doctors want to work.
Want to work, right? And it used to be locums was folks that the twilight of their career, I think historically, older guys. We have folks coming out of residency that are looking like they've said like I've made a decision. This is kind of what I want to do. I think it's better to go be someplace for a couple of years, get through your boards, get your case, get your reps. You do a lot of growing as a surgeon, immediately after training, and be in a place where you can have that supportive environment. In a situation, we have people that do locums as fellow to, when they're on vacation while they're fellow to make extra money. There are a lot of those. We have, a bunch of military folks that can take leave and go do locums and help supplement their income that way. We have academics that do this, like, maybe they'll do a week, a quarter, or so. And, an extra 25 to 30K bolus every quarter is nice. And folks, you see a lot of it when their ability to tolerate some pain, workplace pain or gripes or, people start considering that when the kids are like in high school and moving on and stuff. So you see, that last kid leaves, then, leaves the house, empty nesters. You see, you start seeing those shifts even more so that like, yeah, or they're calling me and they're saying, hey, juniors and, starting senior year, what do I need to do to get ready to kind of, be ready to do this kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's interesting you say, because I hadn't really thought about you take vacation from your normal job to go make extra money doing locums. I don't personally have any doctors that I'm working with that are doing that currently. And that's an interesting idea to think about in a certain phase of life. Or I'm thinking about, you just come out and student loans weigh so heavy and that can be a big burden. I think the forgiveness on the loans is a little more tenuous. And so thinking, hey, could I do this for 2 years, 3 years, something like that to get these loans knocked out while I'm, kind of ramping things up, so to speak, in my career before you have kids and things like that.
And we kind of advertise that to folks that if they're considering doing this, coming out to say, delay this whole idea of, timing is everything. Timing can be the difference between a good investment. The stock market, real estate deals, hold along, sell the world. But nobody talks about that in the job market because you think like we have this, this fake, just false idea that you need to, you need to get the perfect job to start in July after you finish training and all that. But the perfect job may not come open till September, October, December, January of the next year. So maybe instead of just settling because you think you need to, or you think you need this income, or maybe you did find a great job, but instead put off the start date till January, take a month of vacation, take it easy, got done with residency, and go make some money and pay off your student loans in 6 months. What's average student loans? $200,000, $250,000 for med school these days?
250 is what I expect to see usually. Yeah, sometimes it's more than that, believe it or not, but 250 is my expectation.
250. So you could work with us and pay that off in 6 months. So why not?
Wow. Well, I'm thinking I had an anesthesiologist who husband got a great job opportunity. And so they were moving to a different place. She looked at all the groups that were there and she was like, this is the one I'm going to work for, but they don't have an opening right now. And so she did. She took a couple different locums contracts and she waited out. I don't remember, it was 9 months. It ended up being less than a year until that group had an opening, but she had situated with them. She was going to be their next hire. And she used locums to fill the gap, and that worked great for her. So if I'm considering a locums assignment, what should I be looking for? I would be a doctor in this example. What should I be looking for in the contract?
The problem that I had with the contract that originally gave me this idea for starting that callback rate, it was my thesis or my thought in starting this was that you should know exactly how much you're going to get paid for the work you do before you leave and get on the plane or drive across the country to do that, right? But I didn't. And so that's how we structure our contracts, is that we do essentially flat daily rates. And so I spend a lot of my time talking with hospital CEOs, practice managers. I get consult volume, inpatient, census, that kind of stuff to really, or clinic volumes, whatever it's going to be, the scope of work, and understand that that we price it appropriately, that we can pay a premium and get good quality docs that are going to come and do the work on a consistent basis. Yeah, you may be able to, if you don't want to, pay too low, and then you're not able to recruit, because it's a dynamic market and there's a bit of inflation with it, just given the supply demand curve where it is. And so that's different. A lot of the other companies will do a flat rate plus a callback, but they'll do that to be able to juice the numbers for their side from margin. So they'll say, Dr. Smith, we're going to pay you, just say it for rough numbers, $1,000 for your flat rate. And that's going to include your first 4 hours of work. And then we're going to pay you $250 an hour above and beyond that. And these may not be accurate numbers for today's rates, but then they'll tell the hospital, okay, it's going to be $3,000 or $4,000 for the first, and that's going to include zero hours. So their pure profit they're billing the company, the hospital, for those first 4 hours that you're not paying any difference. So there are all these ways that a lot of these companies will juice these contracts. And so there's so much margin out there, we can save the hospitals money and pay our doctors better in the process and be more reliable.
So are you always working through some kind of agency or like a company like yours? If you're a doctor taking a locums position, is there always someone in the middle?
Not always. You can go direct and contract, kind of like how I did with that hospital where I started the service line on the radio after that failed contract. You won't get it. It's harder. Sometimes you can get the pay. A lot of hospitals don't want to directly contract with the physicians. A lot of it's, they say, for FMV reasons or like Stark rule reasons, that kind of thing. So you won't be able to get sort of premium paid. They're always going to try to push you into a W-2 salary kind of thing, even as a part-time.
Yeah, it can be hard for businesses to have, from an IRS like audit perspective, and you mentioned some other kind of legal reason that can be hard for businesses to have both W-2 and 1099 employees doing the same work. And so that I can see where there would be reticence to that from a hospital perspective.
Right. So what you have to do if you're going to do that. And so I actually advise docs on how to do this, because if you can directly contract and you can do something better for yourself, I'm all for doing what, for my colleagues out there, do what's best for you. But a lot of times, having done this for a long time, we can help you be more successful and do it all yourself. We have credentialing teams, all this kind of stuff, to just, administrative support. But if you can do it on your own, and usually if you're going to do that, what I'd tell you to do, you need to start your own LLC. You need to go get your own malpractice insurance, and instead of thinking like a doctor, thinking like a business, go execute a PSA or provider service agreement with the hospital, scope of work, all that kind of stuff, outline the terms of it. And you can do that on your own in some place, depending upon what services you're rendering. And some hospitals are more outside the box thinking that are willing to do that. And the ones that can save themselves some money sometimes, but they're not. But if that doesn't end up working out from management of the service line, they usually don't have the outreach to be able to replace said doctor.
Well, and even just making sure, even just some of what you said, getting an LLC set up, making sure you have malpractice insurance, all of that sort of thing, you need someone who's going to be making sure that you're doing the things that you need to be doing in order to be set up for success. So if that's a company like yours, if that's having a good financial advisor, accountant, business attorney, things like that, I love your advice that this is a business, whether you think about yourself as a business or not, when you start doing regular locums, this is 1099 income. To the IRS, that's business income. And so you need to be thinking about that business opportunity that you have, which includes some protections, which includes some tax advantages, things like that. And you have to be working with people who are savvy enough to help you plan for those things. So obviously, occupationally, I like that you're encouraging people to think about that. But also, that's a real thing that I see from doctors who maybe have really good lines of 1099 income coming in and haven't done anything to really take advantage of it and get some of the benefits that they would have or protect themselves in that.
Yeah. Pay for good advice. It's one of the best investments you can do.
Love that.
Yeah. And we talk about this, like people like, oh, when they're comparing, I pay for this account, you're like, no, you don't want to pay the lowest amount. Like there's one thing to sort of fill out a tax return. Like you want the strategy, learn, and not just learn. I think doctors, it's really important to understand the tax code and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We can go on for hours about that.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's like if things are cheap, sometimes they're cheap for a reason. And so make sure that you're getting what you pay for and that what you're paying for is what you actually need to get. And a lot of times when you get into some of this complexity, that you should be paying a premium because you need that premium expertise. I love that.
Expensive lawyers that are very subspecialized in what you need.
Yeah.
Having learned, I have paid a lot of tuition for the mistakes I've made, if you will. And so get the lawyers that are, because then they're very efficient with their time. Their billable hours their price may be higher, but they're very efficient with their time. And they've done that one thing.
So what's normally included in the pay structure? Is it just that hourly and then you're responsible for your expenses, your housing, your travel, all that? Is that often included in the contract? Help us understand that.
Yeah. So normally industry-wide, whether it's callback, a base rate with a callback or a flat rate. So, we pay the flat rate for the days for all work done within a day, usually. But that's how it works. And then usually your travel expenses such as flight, lodging, malpractice is covered. Everything else is covered. The only thing that's not covered usually industry-wide is meals. But you can save your receipts. You can still deduct those and, talk to your tax professional, keep good records, as they always say. And usually you're paid as a 1099 instead of a W-2. There can be tax advantages to doing that. Again, I'm not a financial advisor or accountant, but learn and about those kind of things. Depending upon the pay from the companies. So my thing is, how I started this and how I run this is I want us to take the best care of our docs. And how are we doing a better job always? So, we usually pay our docs within 5 days of finishing an assignment. So our cadence is that most of our schedules are running Monday through Monday. And so if you submit, like an internal invoice to us, how it works. And, by end of business on Monday, the money's deposited into your account by Friday that week. Every once in a while there's some banking glitch or whatever, but for the most part, that's what it is. We have full-time travel people that arrange all the travel. And unfortunately, it's usually Sunday evenings or Sundays when people are moving and switching for assignments that, whatever the airline is having snafu. So that's when they're a little busier on the fly. Yeah. Unfortunately. And so we've actually had to build in redundancies to that within our team so that not everybody is there's not just one person getting slammed on a Sunday afternoon.
That sounds like a lot of value though, when you think about a direct contract. And I guess it depends on what your goals are and all of that. But if you are looking to do this as more of a career for a period of time or for a long period of time or whatever, it sounds like there's a lot of value to finding a good partner who can source the opportunities for you, who can help with a lot of the logistics, who can make sure you get paid. Because I'm thinking, my gosh, if you were trying to manage multiple of those contracts on your own, there are people that could do it, don't get me wrong, but it would be a lot of work to do that.
And if you're doing it directly, be prepared to wait for months for the hospital to pay you.
That's what I was thinking, actually.
The AR is real. And if you're going to do this on yourself, be a squeaky wheel because that's what gets grease. And
well, I think back to your story of how you started the whole thing, and that was it. You're like, I scheduled a meeting with the CEO of the hospital, which we've known each other for a very long time, so I'm not surprised by that at all. There aren't very many doctors who would think to do that so quickly. And so I really like that advice too, because I think you found a lot of opportunity in your career by being that squeaky wheel. And for starting as basic as just making sure you get paid for the work you provided, that's a no-brainer. But there's other opportunities that potentially can be unlocked by making sure that your voice is heard by whoever needs to hear it.
Yeah, I think, and coaching a lot of, I essentially do a lot of coaching for all these docs that reach out to me like, hey, I'm not in a great situation. Is locums the right option for me, whatever. But I think to your point is like, lean into, don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. And the other thing is like, really know your worth. That's so important. You spend all this time. Do you know what your value is out there? And sometimes, unfortunately, for the way medicine and a lot of businesses are set up within medicine, is like voting with your feet is the only leverage that you have in some situations and negotiations. And so locums gives that opportunity.
Yeah, there are a lot of doctors out there too that undervalue themselves without knowing it, because you're talking about if they're in a not great situation, probably part of that is being undervalued, being overworked, being underpaid. And we're seeing that more and more. I think there was a big shift since the pandemic, just in the landscape of medicine and what doctors are willing to do. And I think part of the reason for that is because the healthcare system's answer for a lot of, I guess, the financial struggles or whatever, the financial challenges that they're trying to work through is we'll just have doctors work more. We'll have them do more with less. And, there's a breaking point with that. And so thinking about being in a situation where you are undervalued, where you're being overworked, where maybe expectations are too much, and then going into something where you're expected to advocate for yourself and negotiate for that value, you could lose some going one to the other. And so again, having someone telling you, this is what the rate should look like, this is what you should be getting paid, you need to have that because you need to build yourself up so that you can advocate for yourself.
There is one thing I do want. There's some, I won't say shadiness, but in the industry as a whole, so if you're out there as a doc, whether it's urology or any other specialty, if you're talking to another company, make sure that you guard your CV very closely and you don't let there's a term called presentation. If you get presented to a hospital, make sure you're very clear and you understand in writing what the rates are and everything else before you let yourself and your name be name cleared and presented to another hospital for you to go work at. Because once you get presented by company A to a hospital, even if you find you can make $2,000 more a day from a different company working at that hospital, if that first company A has already presented you over, even just sort of send an email with your name in there to do a name clear, they kind of own you working at that. That's the way a lot of these industry locums contracts are. So we get a lot. So they can make more with us if they work through us at that hospital. But if they've let themselves, and they don't know, a lot of times they don't know about this. And you only learn about it when something goes south, right?
Yeah.
Once it's happened, right? Then,
so how do you prevent that from happening?
Just make sure you're working with good people. And I know that's really hard. At this point, we're only doing urology.
Right.
So if you're in urology, talk to us and we'll shoot you straight. And there are opportunities that might be better for urologists that are not really with us at this time because we're younger than, we've been around for a little over 6 years. So we don't have all the jobs, but there may be jobs out there. So what our team does and what I instruct our team is if there are opportunities that we think is a better fit for you geographically, pay wise, time wise, at this point, go do that job. We're not going to try to hold you working with us. We think in time, eventually, and a lot of folks will do that. They'll go, in the meantime, we're going to, or at this point, I'll go work here. And then, and we keep touch with them. And at some point they'll come in the fold and working with us because at the end of the day, when it's apples to apples, comparing between two companies, and we tend to be doctors or urologists will tend to choose to work with us because of how we take care of them.
Well, and you being a doctor, you understand both sides of it in a way that someone who's running a business, I certainly cannot understand what it's like to be a doctor. I grew up in a physician household, but that still doesn't tell you what it's like once you get into the hospital. And so, you being there and being boots on the ground and having worked these contracts, worked in these environments, you understand what it's like better than anyone.
Yeah. And I'm probably the only locums company that I know of that I actually get on a plane and I go there and I look through the OR, through the ER, meet the clinic staff. I look at the scopes, the laser, the disposables, all the kind of stuff.
You were here in Nashville when we met and you were headed to Kentucky to go scope out a new contract.
Exactly. And we're starting that one pretty soon. So, and I was doing that last week in Louisiana and Georgia. So that's where I'm spending a lot of my time, not just talking with them, but really helping. How do we build these programs to really improve access to care? Because that's what's happening in urology is really critical.
No, I love that as a mission, and I love that it's a win-win because it's good for patients, it's good for doctors, and provides a lot of opportunity. Is there any advice? You've given a lot of great advice throughout this. That's why I always love talking with you. Is there anything that we haven't already covered that you would give as advice to a doctor who's maybe curious and thinking about trying this for the first time?
Don't do like I did one day and just quit your job without having a plan in place. It's a great way to put fire in your belly to get things done. If it's, depending on, regardless, especially talk to a couple of people. You can reach out to me. I'm always happy to talk to people, even if they're not in urology, and get you connected to people that I know in the industry that will take care of you, even if they're not urology. And if you're thinking about doing it, take a week of vacation from your current job and go set up to go do some locums or a long weekend or what have you. Try it out. See if that's something you want to do part-time. See if it's something that you could see yourself doing as a full-time, replacement. Going back to the financial thing, I think part of this goes hand in hand. It's very important to always know your numbers. I mean, as I quiz my kids on when we talk Shark Tank, I said, you'll get destroyed. What do we? If you don't know your numbers, Kate, the 11-year-old, loves Shark Tank. So,
yes. Oh my gosh, so do I.
Yeah. And she knows that she'll, this person doesn't know what's going on.
I know you get people in there who you're like, have you ever watched the show before?
Yeah. And I think Kate wants to grow up to be a shark, is what she says. So anyway, yeah. So it comes down to your personal financial statements and other things. So I always encourage doctors. And so I kind of do a little overview of do an income statement, balance sheet thing, but know what your expenses are, know how much you need to make, give yourself cushion, all that kind of stuff. And so when people talk to me and how does this look? I said, well, what do you want? And I think that goes whether you're looking at a perm job or whatever it is, define success on the front end. Then I can do a better job of helping create a solution to help you achieve that success. And I think it's probably the same thing for you when you're planning out people's retirements. Like, when do you want to do this? What do you want that to look like? And then how you do that. Try it, dip your toes in the water. It feels, if it looks like it could be something you could see yourself doing, then you can, leave if that's the right thing, or you just use it as a supplement. And there's seasons of life, and it's not something you always have to be locums. It may just be it's a great way to test out new jobs or test out new markets. There's what we call locums to perm. And I tell clients and docs, try before you buy. And so people look great for a day at a dinner or a tour, but see how people act in the OR or the staff, the support, all that kind of stuff. And if you get those good vibes after a couple months, move the family.
It's like a rent to own, like a locums to perm.
It is.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And that's what I tell hospitals. They're like, if we could just get the doctor to come and see the community, we know we would sell them on it. I'm like, well, locums is a great opportunity for you to try out a lot of docs to try out you. And we have about one doc a quarter or so that will perm out. When I say perm out, they will take a job and stay in the community. And it's usually by surprise. They don't go there thinking hey, I want to do this. But I had a doc that started working with us recently that left, just recently. It's only been out of training 2 or 3 years, and their practice has already been bought and flipped twice in that period of time, and just said, I can't do that. And this doc said, I'm not going to sign another, contract till I've been there. I've tried it. And so I'm going to use locums as a way to, and they're doing great with us. And so.
That's great. That's awesome. So my last question I have for you, and we've touched on this kind of incidentally as we've gone throughout, but we have this concept at Vestia we call wealth that matters. So this idea that, just like you said earlier, if you work and work and work and save and save and save so that you get to some eventual point when you're going to enjoy it, you've kind of missed the whole point. There's a lot that goes into wealth that's not financial. There's your relationships with your family. There's your health. There's all of these other things. So I'm curious, how would you describe what wealth that matters means to you?
Did I tell you about that book, Economics?
You did, yeah. Okay.
So it's like that. There are the different buckets of capital, if you will, spiritual capital. It's not the money in the bank. It's like that's the summit fallacy you hear talked about. When I get here, I'll do this, and when I get there, you're never going to get there, whatever it is. So figure out a way to find joy and fulfillment in where you are now with your relationships. For me, a lot of it comes from faith. We're all, just the fact that we were born in the United States, we're blessed beyond measure as far as opportunity. And, if you're a physician, just the ability, the resources that you have to do good stuff. So I think real wealth is just, from an investment standpoint, I think people are the greatest asset class to invest in. The opportunities for return. And for me, it's important to invest with an eternal perspective. And so go back to time, when you're talking about eternity, man, the returns are big, versus a finite, time things from a temporal standpoint. So yeah, I think I spend a lot of time thinking about that kind of stuff. Is like, to whom much has been given, much is required. And so when you think about ROI or ROE, so for those, return on equity versus return on investment, it's like, with what you've been given, how are you, deploying that in a way that's going to be highest yield? In my opinion, it's when you can roll up your sleeves and work alongside your money from an investment standpoint, you can have a higher yield. So I think it's important to define what success looks like. For me, some of that redefining success came. I started thinking about it when Charlotte, my oldest, was turned 10, and then he kind of hits you like, this is going by really quickly. And what's valuable, and a lot of times in doctors of productivity, we measure productivity by work RVUs and so forth. So I think like, how many RVUs do I get for dropping my kid off at school? Like when I was growing up, I don't know when you're growing up, drop off and pick up with something that your mom did. Dad was a doctor, and that was something and that was very rare. Something was going on if dad picked you up from school, right?
Yeah. My mom broke her leg and my dad came and picked me up from school.
I know, right.
That's my one memory of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, and so that was just, how do you be intentional about doing that stuff? And so like, you may not get the value or the productivity at work measurement there for that. And so it's worth, like, you rebalance your stock portfolio, always be looking to sort of rebalance your, potentially your portfolio of where you're making your money and just, multiple streams of income, but also where your time is and the return on the time that you're investing in. And you're stuffing with other folks. And so.
Love it. There was a lot of wisdom in that. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Ian, for being here today. Thanks for kind of shedding the light on so much of what goes into locums. There's so much great advice on both locums and life and career and all of that was packed into this. So I'm just so grateful for you spending time with us today.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Are you looking to hire a financial advisor with physician-specific expertise? At Vestia, we work exclusively with doctors, helping you navigate things like student loan repayment, reviewing RVU-based contracts, navigating practice buy-ins or private equity offers, optimizing retirement plans, designing tax-smart investment strategies, and planning for things like parental leave or early retirement. We have over 150 years of combined experience working with specialized physicians. So chances are, if you're thinking about it, we've helped another doctor through it. We built our firm around one goal: helping physicians achieve wealth that matters. Planning that's not just about numbers, but about designing the life you actually want to live. That means your wealth lets you live the life you imagined when you first started this journey. Time with your family, freedom in your schedule, and confidence in your decisions. Not sure how you're doing today? Head to vestiaadvisors.com/DEO, that's DEO for Doctor's Eyes Only, to take our 3-minute Physician Wealth Checkup and get a snapshot of where you stand today and what to do next. Thank you for listening to the Doctor's Eyes Only podcast. We hope today's conversation advanced your journey to wealth that matters. Please make sure to follow and subscribe so you don't miss a single one of our amazing episodes we have coming up. See you next time. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Vestia Advisors, LLC. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. It should not be construed as legal or tax advice and is not intended to replace the advice of a qualified attorney or tax advisor. This information is not an offer or a solicitation to buy or sell securities. Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Before investing, you should consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses associated with investment products. Investment decisions should be based on an individual's own goals, time horizon, and tolerance for risk. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Diversification and asset allocation do not ensure a profit or guarantee against loss. Consult your financial professional before making any investments. Investment advisory services offered through Vestia Personal Wealth Advisors, Vestia Retirement Plan Consultants, and Vestia Advisors, LLC. Securities offered through Osdale Financial Partners, Inc., 5187 Utica Ridge Road, Davenport, Iowa, 52807. Member, FINRA, SIPC. Vestia Personal Wealth Advisors, Vestia Retirement Plan Consultants, Vestia Advisors, LLC, and Osdale Financial Partners, Inc. are independently owned and operated.